Welcome trainers to the series where we update the type chart and edit all 18 types with my own changes as well as your own input. From the interactions they have with other types, certain battle effects associated with the type, and any alterations we can make to existing information regarding the type. We've covered a few types now, but honestly they're at the bottom half of my most favourite types. Let's look at the top half now and cover the flying type, which is pretty perfectly balanced both in the main games and competitive. I think I share Jigsaw's sentiment that flying is actually a pretty perfect type as it is. Its weaknesses and strengths balance out with the rest of the types well, and since every flying type besides these three are currently dual typed, it can actually lead to some nasty defensive combos, including ground flying and steel flying. There's even some offensive potential with electric flying, and my personal favourite, fighting flying. Flying on its own, however, checks the common types running rampant in VGC, from grass, fighting and ground. It's because of flying why these types are hesitant when on the field. It's either due to the actual Pokémon themselves, or a supply's flying coverage move. It also counters the annoying bug types that may dominate in a game if you don't have an answer for them. What am I talking about? Nobody is using bug types with how terrible they are, but that's a video for another day, so stick around. The flying type flew so that the levitate ability could soar, however, as Pokemon like Weezing, Flygon, Bronzor, Rotom and more could benefit from their own stab moves, as well as their own resistances, while also being a safe switch into earthquake spammers or potential entry hazards. Even the air balloon is a niche item created to perform a similar role, but to a wider range of Pokemon, which goes to show how important the flying type impacts the meta. Honestly, I'd leave the flying type alone if I had the choice, but I have to follow the rules I set myself, which you could check out in the rules video. So we've established how important flying's immunity to ground is, but obviously, this series is all about controversial decisions. Personally, I feel it's illogical that certain ground moves like Bone Rush, Drill Run and Headlong Rush, which are all contact moves not involving ground in any way, can't affect flying types. Additionally, let's consider flying types like Dojo, Galarian, Zapdos and Mantine, who don't fly in the first place. How do they avoid ground type moves? Do they just jump out the way? Or do they just magically become incorporeal when an earthquake hits? I think you know where I'm going with this. With countermeasures like Levitate, Air Balloon and even Magnet Rise if you're desperate, I think flying should lose its immunity to ground and become a resisted hit instead. Before you all riot though, I'll change it so flying is super effective to ground. I mean, flying around is pretty advantageous compared to a grounded foe. So the new ground resistance will join fighting and bug. But there's one last change I'd like to make for the resistances. Grass should hit flying for neutral damage, in exchange for flying resisting itself. I'm not keen with the grass and flying interaction. I get it from the perspective of birds using nature for their habitat and a source of food, but isn't that every living thing? Maybe not every living thing, but you get the point. So if birds thriving off nature is the explanation as to why flying is super effective to grass, then it's bad news for grass types if every Pokemon uses nature in one way or another. Therefore, I'm just going to eliminate both interactions. Grass is no longer weak to flying, and flying is no longer resistant to grass moves. Flying resisting flying is self-explanatory. Just apply fighting fire with fire logic. An air battle will see no advantage or tactical edge, as both should be accustomed to flying in the sky against other flying types, unless you're a Dojiro. Also, wind-based moves like Hurricane or Gust shouldn't impact them, as they should naturally adjust to wind while flying. Keeping up so far? Originally, flying is immune to ground, and resists grass, fighting and bug. Now flying resists ground, fighting, flying and bug. Although while we're on the topic of wind and wind-based moves, I'd like to shift attention to other types that resist flying moves, including resisting gale-like attacks. So flying moves are resisted by electric, rock and steel. None of these are changing, as each makes sense logically and for balancing purposes. We've added flying into the mix, but there's just one more type I feel should resist flying, and by extension, wind. That type being fire. That's right, I've buffed one of the starter types, so let's buff another. Let's not just make fire resist flying, but let's make it super effective to flying too. See, my logic is that fire is powered by fuel, heat and oxygen. It's just a natural order for fire's existence. If fire types can provide the fuel and heat, then surely the strength of the blaze will only increase when more oxygen is added. As for fire being super effective to flying, I propose this thought process. All aerial objects, big and small, should in theory plummet when set on fire. Literally take any being you can imagine being capable of flight. No problems whatsoever until it catches fire. When this happens, it crashes and no longer has the ability to fly. Smoke rises and is the biggest killer in a fire, so as you'd imagine many flying types will be airborne while battling and will be impacted by the additional effect of a fire move. So let fire types join electric, ice and rock to destroy flying types. Now we move on to the part of the video where I introduce a concept that the type can benefit from in a battle, and I'd like to showcase a new battle effect that I'd like to call Rooms. It'll activate similar to Trick Room, but rather than affecting every Pokemon, it'll only benefit one type. In this instance, it'll be for flying types. So how Rooms will work is it'll be a move that changes the battlefield to an arena that affects a certain stat, just like how weather and terrains affect certain types. Maybe it'll override Trick Room, or maybe it'll work in conjunction. Either way, for flying types specifically, the speed stat will double. Rooms will last for 5 turns and can be eliminated by other rooms or just certain abilities similar to how weather and terrains can be reset. So these are just my thoughts for the flying type. It's a perfectly balanced type, but to appease the rules, I've just tweaked the resistances and made fire join the super effective hitters. The hottest take is definitely claiming flying is too good for a ground immunity. So feel free to let me know your thoughts in the comments section. Have I gone too far and destroyed flying's viability? Or do you appreciate the likes of grass and fire getting a much needed buff? Don't miss out on those future videos too by subscribing today. Final stretch before we reach the big 100, so every click counts. We've covered 4 types now, so we're about a quarter of the way through this series. I'd love to have you join me through the journey. Until then, however, make sure to train hard and team build to the best of your ability, and I'll see you guys in the next video.